Everybody, Jake here with TrendSpider to go over the weekend analysis for the week of February 11th next week. And there's a couple things to look at into next week. And the first thing is essentially the daily price action respecting the weekly SMA 20. So this is the daily chart with the overlay of the SMA 20 from the weekly candle here. So what we can see first off is this area is now holding as support, and before it was a very hard area of resistance as we were making our way down from October into late December. Now, from a longer term perspective, we can see here that the SMA 50 on the weekly candle and the weekly chart was actually a perfect area of resistance this week. And we can also overlay this on the daily chart here, simply doing this. So this is essentially this line from the weekly candle on the daily time frame. So we can see that the price is kind of ping-ponging back and forth between this area, and we're really right at the apex of this symmetrical wedge here, and we'll just have to really see kind of if this area can hold as support. And this is a pretty important area because this has been the main resistance area, finally broke through it, and now we're right back at the right above it. So if we break down through this, this could be a sign of things to come, and we'll just have to see. Anything's possible in the market, but from this perspective, the resistance right at the SMA 50 here on the weekly candle is a little telling that we may be ready for a pullback. Who knows, maybe to the channel support below around 262. Now the thing is, when we start looking at the lower indicators, those are kind of telling a different story. So we can see on the daily MACD that the histogram has kind of been moving down here for a while, and that means that essentially the MACD here line is getting closer and closer to the signal line here. And so when this crosses, that's when this goes negative. That's when the histogram goes below zero. And so when this starts curling to the downside, sometimes that can mean momentum is fading, but this can also false signal and kind of go right back up. So all in all, this is not necessarily the most bullish case into next week. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. The percent range is starting to move down again, and the vortex indicator is diverging here with the blue over the red. The last time we've kind of seen that type of divergence and then a conversion between the two, that was right before the big drop in October. So we are starting to slowly converge down. Generally, I look at the blue crossing the red as a confirmation of possibly more downside to come, and then the red crossing the blue to the downside as more upside. So notice when this crossed here, that was right here, and we had more room to move up. So obviously there's some noise here. This isn't necessarily the most clean chart on the vortex indicator, but that's the general kind of idea, is when these kind of diverge and then start converging, that's when a move is possibly going to happen. Now on the weekly chart, we can see that we recently just had a MACD cross. The vortex indicator red is crossing the blue here, which when we saw in the past, that was an indicator for more room up on the daily. So we'll have to see if this continues on the weekly. We'll just have to kind of see if that holds true. Notice the very clean cross here before our big move down. So this could be kind of a status quo changer for more upside, but this weekly SMA 50 is really something to watch into next week, especially with this kind of indecision doji right at the top of this trend. Now, when we kind of look and compare the indexes across the board, one thing that's interesting is when we go back and look at December 24th, pretty much in the height of this move down from October to December, this candle was really not showing us any type of, reversal possibility. It was a pretty strong candle down, showing sellers were in control the whole day. But then, we moved to QQQ, and we kind of see something similar, where on the 24th of December, there was like no hope from this candle. Same exact day, sellers in control the whole day, closing at the low of the day, and then we have this big move up. Now, where did that come from? Well, it's a couple things. We can then look at XBI and see if that was kind of signaling any type of reversal possibility. And what we can see here is, notice on the 24th of December, this doji formed rather than the very big sell candle on SPY and QQQ. So when I was looking here, to me, this was like, all right, well, this may be kind of a bottom because we're seeing this bullish kind of candle here on one of the more, let's say, quote unquote, speculative indexes. So to me, that was telling me that risk is possibly coming back into the market. And when there's risk, risk-seeking behavior, that generally, especially at a bottom, means that there could be kind of some upside to come in the other indexes as well. So this kind of signaled that people were kind of getting back into riskier kind of speculative securities. And so it's just interesting to see how these relationships can kind of hold true across the board. So now my point is here is notice how the XBI candle here is red. Now the SPY candle is green, but it's still showing pretty, indecision here, and it's right at the SMA 50. Now XBI has not even made it to the SMA 50 on the weekly candle yet, and is really showing some signs of sellers becoming in control again. Now the thing is on the daily candle, we have the same exact setup here. We've got the weekly SMA 20 acting as support here, a nice bounce. Now on this particular chart, on the daily XBI chart, notice how this area was not an area of resistance above. This trend line was kind of what kind of made the market, if you will, here, and kind of was an area that the price stopped at these two times and really reversed hard. So from that perspective, we're all kind of in the same spot on the daily candle, hovering right above the SMA 20 on the weekly. But then the weekly candle SMA 50 is where we have some discrepancy here. On QQQ as well, we're trading right at this area. We can see here. And so XBI, to me, that tells me, all right, are people starting to kind of get out of riskier assets now and kind of play it safer? So, we have two very hard areas of resistance on SPY and QQQ at the SMA 50. And then on XBI, as I mentioned, we don't even have that area tested yet, with a weekly candle starting to look a little ugly. So we've got this big megaphone channel here. And honestly, we do have kind of a textbook inverse head and shoulders, if you will, but that only holds true unless this area holds. So let's say, if the price really starts moving below around 75, that could be an area to watch for a further breakdown. But honestly, this could easily pull back to around 75 to test that lower right shoulder here. So here's our first shoulder, here's our head, and then if this moved back down, that could be the second shoulder. So all in all, we'll just have to see what happens. Not a ton of volume the last few weeks, and honestly, on the daily candle, kind of another thing that I pay attention to. Notice how the MACD is already crossing to the downside on the daily chart, but then on SPY, the MACD has not crossed yet. So it's kind of like looking at these different indices and ETFs and seeing, all right, which one is moving first. And in this case, it seems within this kind of this price action, if you will, since October, it seems that XBI has been leading the pack. We'll have to see if this MACD cross on XBI is leading the pack to the downside again next week. Notice that we are curling here. We could easily cross to the downside, and then XBI would have been the confirmation last week, with that already happening on the daily chart. So all in all, things are getting a little interesting here. We've had a huge move up. We've got the MACD cross on the daily chart with XBI, and the vortex indicator blue is crossing through the red here, which has been a signal of more downside in the past. So the last time we really had this divergence and then a clean cross here, that's right before the move down happened in October. So all in all, I can't really say what's going to happen. I'm not an advisor, I'm not licensed, but just based on these patterns and kind of how the market is moving, I would not be shocked if there was some downside in the coming weeks. Solely my opinion. If we look at the longer term chart, we can see that the vortex is showing some bullish tendencies here. So we'll just have to see what happens. I'll continue to kind of look at the charts and see what it looks like. But at the end of the day, no one really knows what's going to happen. We can only use these areas as predictive probability areas and just kind of look at the patterns and see what's happened in the past to get an idea of what could possibly happen in the future. So that is all we have for the weekend analysis, everyone. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about the longer term overlays on the shorter term charts, such as the weekly SMA here, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to help you. But quickly, all you really have to do is go to the time frame here, make sure MTFA is enabled. You can then go to a higher time frame, so we can either choose from the weekly or the monthly. And then once we choose that, we have all these options to add these indicators with the longer term option as well. So we can easily do this on the lower indicators too. If we wanted to see the weekly vortex here, we can just do that here. We can hide that. And so then we can see the daily price action and how the weekly vortex is looking. So that's kind of a cool way to condense your charts a little bit and keep multiple time frames on one single chart. But that is how you can kind of use the MTFA feature. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. Everyone have a great weekend, and thank you so much for listening. Thanks.